I've spent the past several days solving some of Hogwarts Legacy's darkest secrets. Take, for example, this treasure vault just north of Clagmar Castle. Inside, you'll find a cloaked figure crumpled on the ground. As you approach, you may notice the moss overtaking the body, but it's the note beside this figure, a note containing just one word that will send a chill down your spine. There are actually 11 characters similar to this one, wizards and witches who met an untimely end in their ventures across the Scottish Highlands. In this video, I'll reveal all the locations as well as any related notes or letters left behind, and I'll also attempt to piece together exactly how these characters died.
Revelio.
The official Hogwarts Legacy channel actually put out this challenge to us fans months ago.
As an opportunity for exploration and discovery, there are 11 NPCs in the open world who each died in mysterious ways, with notes that tell each of their unique stories. See if you can find them all.
Surprisingly, as I was researching for this video, I found no comprehensive list. There were bits and pieces here and there, especially in the early days of the game as fans stumbled across these NPCs, usually in shock at what they found. Perhaps even more surprisingly though, this 11 does not include the tragic fate of Tobbs the house elf, nor does it count the grisly demise of the spider-breeding Mary Portman. No, we're talking 11 NPCs unrelated to major or even minor story quest lines. And even with nearly 200 hours of total playtime in Legacy, I had personally missed quite a few of these. So here are the stories of 11 witches and wizards whose tragic fates show a much darker side of the wizarding world. In the hamlet of Cragcroft, you can find a letter on the notice board just outside of town. It's labeled as the Cragcroft Love Letter in your inventory with a date of September 21st, 1871. In the letter, a man by the name of William laments being away from his darling Susan. He lets her know he plans to be in London for at least 3 more months, but hopes to be home for Christmas. He's also quite fond of her mother's treacle tarts. Tragically, William and Susan's story does not end with a happily ever after. To discover William's fate, you'll need to travel west of Cambridge, where you'll come to an inconspicuous cave. There's a whirlpool at the end of the path, and diving through this pool leads you to a body. William's body. His body rests in the mud with his travel supplies nearby. Beside him is the final entry in a diary, which gives us a bit more context into how he may have died.
My beloved, the moon is not yet full, yet such is my family's fear that they have sent me away prematurely. I am frightened. As a wolf, I am powerful, but before the moon is round, I am merely human. Merlin knows what beasts I may encounter in my present form. It does no good to dwell upon it. I hope I last this night, and will be in your arms before long. William.
With Hogwarts Legacy taking place in the late 1800s, William would have had little hope for a cure. The Wolfsbane potion, which only helps to relieve the symptoms of lycanthropy, wasn't invented until sometime after the 1970s by Damocles Belby, who happened to be a student of Horace Slughorn at Hogwarts. While William's body doesn't contain any visible wounds, we can see his clothes have been ripped and torn. Perhaps he was attacked by one of the many beasts he feared in his diary, or maybe he could never bring himself to leave the cave and died of thirst or starvation. Either way, it's clear he and Susan never got the future that they were hoping for. One of the most fearsome creatures in all of the wizarding world would have to be the basilisk. Breeding them would actually land you a lifelong sentence in Azkaban. It just so happens a significant portion of the plot in Hogwarts Legacy deals heavily with poaching activities and the illegal breeding of certain unauthorized creatures, such as acromantula and yes, even basilisks. If you stop by the Daily Prophet stand in Hogsmeade, you may come across the story about a Cornish wizard who was arrested for breeding basilisks. He pleaded ignorance and claimed that his chicken coops were simply irresistible to toads. And while I don't think it's the same wizard mentioned in this Prophet article, you actually can find the body of an illegal breeder, and one that the Ministry certainly had on their radar. Start by fast traveling to the Tower Tunnel Flooflane, located at the most southeastern point of Marunweem Lake. From there, start making your way back down the mountain until you spot an area blocked by the Devil's Snare roots. Cast Lumos and make your way through to find our second victim, as well as a couple of chickens and 2 empty cages nearby. This letter is from the Ministry of Magic and is giving the individual advance notice they'll soon be inspecting his chicken coop for any toads on the premises. You see, in the world of Harry Potter, basilisks are created by hatching chicken eggs beneath a toad. Once the basilisk hatches, they're incredibly dangerous creatures. Looking indirectly into their eyes results in petrification, a frozen state that can only be cured with a mandrake restorative draft. Looking directly into the eyes of a basilisk, however, results in instant death, unless you're a ghost. So it would seem this illegal breeder actually succeeded in hatching a basilisk, and yet he didn't seem to take the proper precautions to avoid its deadly gaze. Whereas our last victim suffered the consequences of trying to perform a dangerous illegal activity for profit, our next case is one who appears to have had only the best intentions in mind. This tale begins at the West Hogwarts Valley Flue Flame. Head north from there, flying above the cliffs until you come across a campsite with a wagon outside. Here you'll find not one, but two dead bodies. The first one is concealed, whereas the second one is just beside the wagon. Surrounding the bodies are books, a few plants, potions, and a number of other healing items. The note here indicates the witch before us was actually a healer attempting to cure a patient from a textbook case of dragonpox, as noted by the typical symptoms such as pockmarked skin, sneezing sparks, and a rash between the toes.
I have prescribed a second dose of the Gorsmore cure, but it may not be sufficient. As such, I have further prescribed an elixir to induce euphoria, to ease the patient's probable passing. Must sanitize my equipment. Highly contagious.
But even with the knowledge of the incredible risk of being around the disease and knowing how important it was to sanitize her equipment, it appears she too contracted the disease and died only a few feet away from the very person she'd been trying to save. The next body belongs to a poacher by the name of Smithy. This location is accessed from within a poppy sweeting mission called Poached Egg. As the two of you set out to return an egg belonging to a Hebridean black dragon, you'll see her fly overhead. Shortly after you pass directly under her, you'll come across a large tree branch in your path. Jump over it, take out the mongrels, but then don't be too quick to leave the area. Straight ahead and just to the left of the wooden steps, you'll find Smithy. Search him to find a letter from his poacher friend, Angus. Angus and his traveling companion, Violet, have moved away from the fighting ring venture and are instead dealing in acromantulas. The letter seems to indicate there had been some form of previous correspondence between them, as Angus seems to think Smithy was planning to join them. As for a cause of death, perhaps he was taken out by the very dragon that Poppy and our main character have saved. But given the state of his clothes and the lack of any scorch or burn marks, my guess is Smithy's superiors learned of his plans to leave and then decided he was just another loose end for their dragon fighting ring. Roughly halfway between the central Hogwarts Valley and Arranshire Flue Flames, you'll find a wooded area teeming with spiders. Just off the path is our next victim, wand still in hand. He carries a letter of warning from one Gerbald Ollivander. It would appear the unnamed customer had previously written to Ollivander about whether or not he should continue using his late aunt's wand. Of course, longtime fans of the series know the importance of the wand choosing the wizard. This proves especially important in the series as Harry has to navigate through a significant portion of the final book without access to his own wand. Ollivander seems particularly concerned about this case in Hogwarts Legacy because it involves a wand made from acacia wood, which he describes as being particularly temperamental. Given the area where we find this respected customer, I'm left to believe he drew the wand and attempted to fight off the oncoming spiders. Instead of protecting him, however, the wand backfired and cost him his life. So far, these dark mysteries have mainly consisted of accidents or dangerous activities taken too far, but case number 6 is one of straight-up murder. A wizard named Hubert can be found near a waterfall just west of the Poidsir Castle Flue Flame. We find a door completely detached from its hinge, laying near the front of a small stone shelter. A cauldron sits at the center with a large scorch mark extending out from it. Hubert's body is behind the cauldron, and on him is a letter to his friend Delia. In it, he tells her about a series of pranks that he's recently been the victim of. They started out small enough, biting doorknobs and pixies in his closet, but after an unexpected portkey sent him to Cumbria, Hubert began to fear the pranks had a more sinister intent. As such, he wrote to the Ministry with hopes they could inspect his house for jinxes. Now, unfortunately for Hubert, this inspection could actually take several days, which means he needed a place to stay.
I shall be displaced for a while. May I stay with you? It will be just me and my trusty cauldron. Hubert.
Sadly for Hubert, the very cauldron he mentions has been jinxed, presumably by the sinister prankster. This, of course, results in the explosion, and one that happens to be strong enough to blow the door off its hinges, as well as leave this large burn mark. As I can find no other body in the area, it would seem that Hubert never made it to his friend Delia. Fortunate for her. Of all the deaths we've investigated so far, this one may have the most mysterious cause of death, and it's not only one body we find, but 3. If you fly south from the West Manor Cape Fluflame, you'll pass a series of craggy-faced cliffs. At first, it may not appear as if there's anywhere to land, but continue along the southwest side, and you will eventually come to a small boat and a campsite along the shore. There are 2 skeletal remains here next to the fire and a 3rd closer to the boat. And speaking of the boat, it doesn't appear to have had a smooth journey. A few wooden boards have washed ashore separate from it, and it also looks like there may have been some sort of crash or explosion here. The most mysterious part of the scene, though, has to be the shape of these large scorch marks. They're the ones over by the 3rd body. And is it just me, or does this actually look like
the Grim?
There's also a diary entry nearby that only leaves us with more questions. The writings are clearly that of a witch or wizard fearing for their life after multiple perceived sightings of the Grim, a well-known omen of death in the wizarding world. The entry concludes with the writer stating,
"My odds are slim, but it's all I can think to do. I must outrun the Grim."
We only have a handful of clues to try and piece together what exactly happened here. The tent, fire, bottles, and cups indicate at least someone reached this area peacefully. Did our unknown writer make it here alone, or were they traveling with companions? Perhaps in their state of extreme paranoia, they stumbled upon 2 other wizards and ended up in a fiery battle that left all of them dead. Would love to hear your theories on this one, so let me know in the comments if you have any thoughts on what exactly happened here. Our next case leaves little doubt as to what caused the death of our victim. By traveling southwest from the North Ford Bog Fluflame and into the forest, you should eventually find a small stone shack. This one is up on a higher terrain, so it's probably easier to reach traveling on your broom than on foot. When you locate the shack, stand at the front door and walk over to the left side until you see a tree with some yellow flowers. There's also a shovel near the base. There you'll find the body of a man crumpled over with his hands over his ears. His letter is from a witch named Tasmina, and in it, she provides our unknown victim with a few pointers on how to become an animagus. Now, at first, I actually thought this was a cruel joke, and that Tasmina had intentionally set out to murder this guy. But these instructions actually do match what's on wizardingworld.com for becoming an animagus. Unfortunately for our victim, it appears that he missed Tasmina's postscript.
P.S. Don't forget cotton for your ears.
Even though mandrakes are handled by students at Hogwarts as early as their 2nd year, they're typically working with younger mandrakes whose screams aren't yet fatal. For fully grown adult mandrakes, however, their cries can be fatal to anyone who hears them without protection. If there was any doubt at all about this wizard's cause of death, the 3 mandrakes just behind him can actually be picked up and added to your character's inventory. If you've flown anywhere near the East Hogsmeade Valley Fluflame, you may have noticed a few different pumpkin patches in the area. Our next victim rests in one of these fields. As you make your way closer to the body, you'll see a rather large burn mark on the ground, as well as bits of pumpkins scattered about the area. Clearly, there's been some kind of explosion that's taken the life of our downed victim. The letter beside him, which somehow managed to survive the explosion, is written to Callum from someone who appears to be a friend named Jocasta. Callum and Jocasta are both fans of little pranks, but it seems Callum may have pushed too far with an old squib and a jinxed toilet. Jocasta thinks the squib is aware of Callum and his pranks, and that he'll do anything he can to stop him. She specifically warns that the squib may have tampered with tools in Callum's shed. So is the individual before us Callum, who died after a squib tampered with his tools? Taking a closer look at the scene, we find what looks to be 3 fireworks, which I would wager were the source of the explosion. There's also a small satchel holding a few unknown liquids. I went over to the nearby shed, and while I found a few tools on the outside, the shed itself was empty, and I didn't see any other clues to help us piece together what exactly happened here. So while I'm not sure of the specifics, it would seem that Jocasta was right about the squib. Maybe he rigged the fields with explosives and set them to detonate when he knew Callum would be working. Now, it's also important to remember that although squibs were incapable of magic themselves, they were still aware of the magical world. They could see things like ghosts and dementors, as well as places magically hidden from muggles, like Hogwarts. Argus Filch, a known squib from Harry Potter's day, was even capable of using magical objects, such as the secrecy sensor in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. So even though this case involves a squib, we can't immediately rule out magic somehow having an impact on Callum's death. Our victim in case number 10 is the Muggleborn I mentioned at the start of the video. Travel to the Clagmar Castle Fluflame on the south side of the map. From there, head north on your broom in search of a treasure vault. You'll know you're getting close when you pass a small brick structure on your left. You'll see two small caves, but the one we're looking for here is the second one, down a bit lower and closer to the water. Inside, you'll find the victim with the one-word note. And while this one doesn't have many clues other than the moss and the letter itself, it seems highly probable that this person was murdered by radical pureblood wizards. Next, we have another unknown victim who died in perhaps the most gruesome fashion of everyone on this list today. Spiders.
Why couldn't it follow the butterflies?
This one is also found in the forest near the North Ford Bog Fluflame. If you zoom into your map, you'll be able to see the spider's nest, and the body we're looking for is just slightly to the right here in these ruins. You may have to clear out a few spiders first, but once you do, you'll find a wizard wrapped tightly in a web. And while the state of the victim leaves no doubt as to how he died, the letter beside him only raises more questions. The phrase, "follow the spiders," is repeated nearly 40 times. There's no name nor date. Was this note actually written by our victim? Or was it written by another who was trying to lead this unfortunate wizard to someone or something? Something tells me we've yet to find all of the secrets contained within Hogwarts Legacy. While there were 11 bodies I found in this search, each containing a note giving a hint as to how they died, there were more bodies I found with no note at all. There are other notes leading to stories of missing persons and unsolved mysteries, but perhaps we'll cover those in a future video. As always, thank you all so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.